Picture this. You are in a leadership meeting. Everyone around the table nods. The decision gets made. And 3 months later, it all falls apart in exactly the way one person privately predicted, but never actually said out loud. You've seen it. Maybe you've lived it. The plan looked solid on paper. The team seemed aligned, but something in the room was off, and you just couldn't name it until it was all just too late. That's what's called room design. Who speaks first matters. Who speaks at all matters. Who gets heard matters. And who isn't even in the room matters most of all. That tightness you feel when you already know the decision is wrong before it's already made. That's your nervous system picking up on patterns in the room and patterns the room keeps producing for you. So my guest today built a company to fix this from the infrastructure up. By the time this episode ends, you'll have a name for that thing that's been making your decision harder than they actually need to be, and a place where you can start. So let's get into it. You're listening to She is a Leader, the podcast for women who are done waiting for permission and ready to build, lead, and scale on their own terms. I'm your host, Evie, and every week I'll bring you conversation with women who have done the hard things and live to tell about it. And this week, that woman is Kylee Ingram. Kylee, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very good, Evie. How are you going?
Doing well. As my day is ending and your day is starting, I always love having women on the podcast from all over the world. So you enjoy your coffee while we are chatting about this weird thing, this decision-making thing, this getting people into a room. And you didn't necessarily start there, right? You came from documentary filmmaking. You directed stories in over 100 countries. You now ended up building a decision intelligence platform. How did that happen?
I just think it's, a natural movement, isn't it? Yes, no. I got into decision science because of television, because there's so few commissioning editors and telling you this, who's choosing what's on TV is a frustrating part of producing. So I did a project once called Crowd TV where we crowdsourced our own program, and it did really well. It got me really deep into decision science and what you could do with that. And my co-founder did his research in wise crowds and came to me and said, hey, you would love this. And by that time, I'd kind of done a lot of interactive things and, had a couple of nominations at Cannes for that interactive part of what you can create. So when he came and said, do you want to do this? I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And then because it is so deep and complex, it keeps one engaged.
What I love also is you in your submission said that you care deeply about designing decisions well. And you also admitted that you don't always get it right, which I love, right? Nobody is perfect. What I'm curious here is, what does it look like when you get it wrong?
Yeah, I mean, to not be flippant about it, it looks like the Challenger disaster or where the worst case is people die. And, I mean, we were looking at a bad decision here recently where nobody did die, where the board, at a writers' festival got it wrong and they all lost their jobs. The writers' festival couldn't go ahead because of what they did. And when you went back and we were able to go back, because I think it's a bit like those things, it's hard to say we know if you get it right, you reduce decision error by 30% and you increase innovation by 20%, but sometimes it's hard to show, whereas you can definitely show what went wrong when it really went wrong. And when you look at that group of people, they all had the same cognitive style. Like, it was almost freaky how similar they were. So they couldn't imagine different situations, and that's kind of how they all went down the drain together.
That's interesting. So less flexibility in the imagination. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, if we kind of dig into the research, and another person I met along the journey, which is possibly the most important person in this story, because, you know, my background as in TV does not make me the expert in the room, was Dr. Juliet Burke, and she ran a whole department at Deloitte and was looking at decision styles, and she worked with 450 organizations that found out, you know, that 30% reduction and 20% increase in innovation. And she found we come at decisions from a certain cognitive way that you can't change. Like, you know, Edward de Bono's, you take on your hat, off your hat, and you imagine other things. You can only really think in one of two ways. So you're thinking about risk, or you're thinking about options or process or evidence, and it's hard to adjust from that. So what happens with the way we think, and you see it in the way society, you know, or maybe it's not so much, it's part of society, is, you know, social media. Social media puts us into these buckets. We enjoy these buckets because they speak, like, you know, it feels good for us. We get the rub against people that don't think the same way, and we're like, oh, I can't be bothered with that. Whereas you can't run your organization that way. You need this diversity of cognition. You need experience, and we know you also need some outward-facing diversity matters too in decisions. And what we're doing at Wiser is we're just trying to help you understand live who you have and what you're missing from all of those perspectives, and how you can design a decision room with everything you need.
Decision intelligence to me sounds like it's a framework, but you're essentially saying it's a full-on infrastructure. Would you talk about what's the difference, and why does that distinction matter of how a leader actually uses decision intelligence and implements it?
Yeah, there's a few things to unpack there, because I think right now with AI, decision intelligence is often seen as AI making intelligent decisions for you. And AI, even if you said to AI, I need somebody in the room like this, it can't interrogate for a long time the way a person can. So we are people first company. We use AI to look at some of the insights for you, but really we're trying to find you the right people. So when we talk about decision intelligence, sometimes I use the word decision science to keep away from that AI piece or distinguish it, but that's kind of what it means. And I think a lot of companies, as they grow, are told, oh, you need this framework. And then you'll get a consultant come in and you'll pay them a lot of money, and it'll be this thing that sits in the background, but it's like, what have we got to do again? We've got to do this and that. Like, we have something where you can just put it in and it'll show you who you have from a cognitive perspective. And then when you go to make a decision, it structures it for you to say, look, you are missing this piece, or you're good to go. So I think sometimes, a lot of our clients talk to us about defensible decisions. They have to make a decision. They have to show the board what was the process they used to get there. And if they can show, look, using Wiser, we've got a green light. We use these people. We know that, maybe somebody that was analytic, we didn't have enough analysis potentially, or we did, or we pulled this person over from here. They're able to, rather than restructure their company or think like permanency in a decision group, you can pop up decision groups easily, and it's a much more flexible solution where you're using different people. The other thing we see is our tech will recommend people. So if we all know the problem in organizations, it's similar people very few of them making all the decisions. And we know who they are and what they look like, and we know who's excluded from the room. But with this, there's an little button that says, here, do you want to add Mary? She would bring this kind of skill or this set to the thing, and all they got to do is click on it, and we see them clicking on it. But 40 to 60% of those people have not been asked before. So it's also a talent identification, which is a really important part of a growing business.
You just talked pretty much about structural bias or structural exclusion, right? We know it's there. What does it look like you already mentioned with your decision-making rooms where it's like, hey, so by the way, this could bring a different point of view to your research, to your intelligence, to whatever you are doing, so that you already have this proactive moment of, hey, so by the way, this is available to you, which to me sounds like just a simple, right? It's not just because, oh my God, we have these programs or this program, right? Especially us here in the States with DEI being cut down and all kinds of things. It sounds like an easy quote data point insertion where it's like, hey, could bring a great point of view to it. So past just big decisions or research moments of collecting information or testing something, what does this integration look like on a normal Tuesday when I don't have a specific big research, but just everyday decisions, right? It's a Tuesday. It's like the work is going. I'm not researching a specific product, or I'm not pitching a specific, trying to get more money and pitching the company to a new investor or anything like that, where it's just on an everyday Tuesday. How can we bring diversity to our decisions on an everyday?
Yeah, well, I mean, what we've created is pretty simple in the sense that you can put all your people in, you put them into your teams, your groups, whatever, and then you say that I just want some advice on this decision. This is what I want to do. And the system goes from red to green. So just let you know, as you add people from the company, it'll say, no, you still don't, whatever. And then it's looking across 3 sectors. It's looking at outward-facing diversity, age, gender, and ethnicity. You don't want to homogenize anything. There's some great jury studies on what goes wrong when there's a homogenized jury panel. And then you've got experience. So if you are launching rocket ships, have a rocket scientist in the room. And then you've also got that cognitive diversity piece. And it's not like a personality test. It takes 4 minutes to do. They're free online, so you can go and do our decision profile online. But it'll show you what you do and don't have in your org. It'll help you structure a good decision room for whatever you want to do on that Tuesday or whatever you're thinking about. You might, pop up some new things. But there's also that stuff. Did you want to touch on, you kind of touched on it quickly, about that structural problem of biases? Like, I think that's kind of what we're trying to solve, aren't we? It's one thing to say we're doing better decisions, but what we're actually trying to do is really get rid of the biases.
We all grow up with it, right? I'm like, I had to revisit myself with a new company we are building, where it's like, I'm tired of the money being in the hands of old white guys, and there is an old white guy standing next to me. Not that I would have considered him an old white guy, right? But I run around with my own bias, where the gentleman I was actually talking to is quite assertive, quite helpful, and totally not the person that I meant when I said the old white guy. And I'm like, okay, calling myself out on that phrasing, got to clean that one up. It's like we all have our own bias, right? And I love that you are making it easier to potentially see our own bias, because we all have it. It comes with being a human and raised by parents and the social build and everything, for that matter.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think, if you think you're biased, like they're just there. And if you're making a decision, just like the first thing you can do is understand that you have biases. And in Juliet's research, she spoke about three main, the three ones that come into a decision room. And one is social bias, who gets listened to and who doesn't, and those voices that dominate. And in Western society in particular, loudness, or, somebody that speaks a lot, they are thought to be the smartest person in the room, or leadership. And that can lead to groupthink when you're not paying attention to that. And then you've got information bias. So what information is being valued and what's ignored? And teams will overweight the data that confirms their view, like social media. They've made money on keeping us siloed because it's part of our biases. It confirms your view, and you undervalue unfamiliar sources. And that is the part in your organization that will create blind spots. And then the one that's relevant to us all today is capacity bias. How much complexity can people handle? And when their load is too high, individuals oversimplify and once again default to the familiar. And that part of the bias equation leads to a lack of creativity and quality of your outcomes. So what we're trying to do with Wiser is just reset that so it doesn't play the role that it usually does, especially if, we see a lot of organizations where 3% of people are making all the decisions and they're not. And we have another thing we see. Juliet's research showed 75% of CEOs in the Western world are one of two cognitive types. They're either outwards, we call them achievers, they're outward orientated, or they are explorers, so they're looking for options. And those two dominate, and then they pick one another. They enjoy one another. So by the time they get to middle management, there's a real erosion of this cognitive diversity because they're being picked by the leaders, or they're being, they're deciding in the same way, and they're all enjoying one another's company. And yeah.
So interesting question. When we see those two specifically kind of play off of each other and rise, what if I'm not one of those two? So I don't know, literally, I'm like, sweet, what if I'm not one of those two? So I'm pretty much lost in the sea of sameness and don't have the same chances of working my way up, or have the same impact, or anything. Is there something that we can, and love me some personality profiles, even the one on yours. Yes, the moment I went to your website and I saw personality profiles, I'm like, oh my God, yes, we're talking my language. So, scroll moment. What can I do, for example, when I don't fall into one of those two and I feel like, great, sweet, awesome. I see the same people rising up. I see the same people always being cliquey over there. They have their thing. What can I do to get myself out of this? Probably partially also bias. What do I do with this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on what kind of leader you've got too. If you had an inclusive leader that understood the science, you would be fine, because they would be like, please speak up. And what ends up happening potentially with somebody that doesn't see themselves in the decisions that are being made or see themselves in the room is the worst thing that ends up happening is they go quiet, they give up. And that silence is when it's all over. The arguments, everyone's still hopeful at that point or whatever, but once you're quiet, you're gone. So doing your decision profile so you understand how you come at decisions is good for you to understand that part. It's research-based, very heavily research-based. So it's good to go on that one. And then one of the other tools we just released it in at Christmas was a communication tool that is now sitting in the thing. A charity came to us and asked us, they use our decision profiles to work out how to communicate with bequesters and donors. And I said, yes, how are you doing it now? And I think we went down this rabbit hole of what did personalization mean? And they're going, oh, how's your cat and your dog and your budgie and whatever else you got, and that's them being personal to you. But when we analyzed 300 emails to donors, they were missing achievers, guardians who are risk, so outcomes, risk, and analyzers that are evidence-based people. And remember, outcomes people are CEOs, so you're missing talking to them completely. And so these emails are very chipper, and they're telling you what they're saving or what they're curing, but they're not delivering the message the way people receive it. So one of the tools we now have within that organizational thing is, imagine you want to talk to your boss and you're like, right, I'm going to write this email. You've written it out and you're like, right, I'm going to send this. Our system will say, hey, look, he's an explorer. You need to like step back. You need to lead with this and write this, maybe write this or add some things. So we're also trying to help. And we've seen teams that are deemed a little bit difficult or have difficulties communicating with that part. Understanding how somebody receives things is very important, and they're cognitively wired that way to receive it. So you writing it, AI can help you write a nicer email, which is wonderful, but you still have to understand what is important to them when they're making a decision.
It's coming back around on a complete simplicity level. It's like, how do we process information? How do we perceive information? What do we do with it? And my favorite example always is with, quote, perception, right? It's like, think of the color red. Chances are you're going to think of whatever red is close by that's sitting somewhere around. And the shade of red that I think of is completely different. So what you have done is make it easier to not only be understood, but to make it hopefully impossible to be misunderstood.
And to be seen.
Where you're suddenly speaking their language.
Well,
it's like,
and this is what we talk about. Decision language. Do you, and one of the study points we're doing at the moment is that change in decision language together. Like, do you end up with a better language for you all to understand that there are gaps in your perception, in whether it be in the red or when somebody says strategy, it might mean two completely different things to two different types of people.
Oh my God. We probably could spend 3 more episodes on language alone, which is one of my favorite topics too, just having spoken German 24 years of my life and then come into English, which has about 1/10 of the amount of words that German language has. It's like, we have so many different levels between I like and I love you, and all of them mean a different level of it, and it's still not as precise as language could be.
Are you like people that have many words for ice? You've got all the words for love. That sounds important. Maybe English should improve itself there.
And for me, it's always the great example of intent and impact between the perception of the word you are using. I'm working in our operational company, and Ask Evie, we're working right now with a company that uses the word entity, and every single department perceives the word entity differently. And it's like, how specifically, and we need to clean up the language so that we actually can combine the processes. And it is so interesting to dive into this and to understand better how people perceive the word or what it means to them, or just all of it that comes together for that. So talking about decisions and talking about our audience and everybody that's now like, oh my God, okay, I'm seeing where you ladies are coming from. I get it. I have some big decisions coming up. I want to do it right. I want to get the best chance I have to make the decision right. What is one thing they can do right now? One thing they should look at right now to start the process of having better rooms to make better decisions?
Well, 90% of our clients, I'd start with decision profile mapping, where you just map your people. You understand who you have in groups or who you have just in your executive team or your board, because look at that one board. They all lost their jobs just because of their sameness. And, You can look at Enron, you can look at NASA, you can look at all the ways that's gone wrong. Just understanding what you're missing from that point is your greatest starting point. And you can do that. You probably do get that done if everybody's on board and doing their decision profile quickly in almost under an hour. It's not a hard lift. It's an easy lift and an important one.
And with that, you all have your marching orders. Go grab Kylie's free decision profile tool. Yes, we usually don't do call to actions, but you know me, I love a amazing tool and getting profiles. And there's your first thing to do. Go map your decision profiles, go figure out who you have in the room and how they make decisions. And if you actually, number one, have diversity in their decision processes, or if you ended up with a room full of people that make decisions all the same ways. And after that, go take action. Go do something with it. We are not just here to collect data. We are not just here to just listen. We are here to do things. So go do things. Go build new rooms. Go learn how we all make decisions. And with that, I'm Evie, and that is She is the Leader. And I'll see you next week again. Thanks so much for coming on, Kylie.
Thank you for having me.